started.
Go.
Welcome, good morning, and wonderful to see you on this Black Friday. That's actually a really nice day. I'm kind of excited about our weather today, although it's been frosty the last couple mornings here. I hope wherever you may happen to be listening to this now, the weather is, everything's smiling on you.
All right.
And my name's Brendan Filbert. I am managing partner with SalesWorks. And what our business is we focus on putting you in front of the right opportunity at the right time for the right reason. So it's all about prospecting. It's all top of funnel. It's all generating and creating opportunities. And I have a partner here today I'm excited to introduce you to. I'll fill you in on the details of our speaker here in just a minute after Chris does his introduction.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm Chris Motley, the big fish at Motley Creations, where we make you look good. What we do is, what that means is we do managed marketing services for small and medium-sized businesses with big goals. I help find the right size solution to execute on your marketing strategy and develop the brand and image that you need to have to be successful.
Fantastic. And I am actually going to do a just really quick setup for our speaker, and then I'm going to let him take it away because he's got some great insight to share with us today. But one of the challenges that I often face whenever I start working with clients, and I know Chris has run into the same thing, where you begin by asking these questions that tend to be along the lines of, who is your ideal customer? And what are the best niches for you to serve? And where is your business actually profitable? And while these may seem like basic questions, oftentimes they end up being based on a gut instinct or a feel that may send you in the completely wrong direction. And it's interesting because I've worked with data professionals in the past, and I'm working with Mike Bascom right now on a joint project, and he's worked with several of my clients in the past. That it's funny, we were working within common relationships, maybe not at the same time, but didn't always overlap. But it's funny because we've covered a lot of the same ground talking about, oh, you were a part of that one. Oh, how cool is that? So he is the guy that's on the, if you think about it like the Wizard of Oz, you know, there's this curtain that goes on, and behind there's the magician with the gears and the levers that makes all the magic happen. Well, that's often the role that Mike gets brought in order to actually make all of the magic happen within the marketing and sales effort. And in some cases, there's a lot, like he's working with a client with us right now that they're basically automating their entire business. And there are some really cool things that you can do now, particularly with all that's happening in the world, and our focus is on moving into a remote work environment and figuring out if your people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, when they're supposed to be doing it, if you're properly communicating with all your contractors. These are all amazing questions that Mike is going to give you just a little bit of a taste of how you can answer all of those questions through data. Mike, do you want to start with just a really quick intro, and then we'll dive into our presentation?
I don't know. It's hard to pass up the intro that you just gave. I have worked in a number of sectors ranging from banking to philanthropy, from healthcare to government and military work. We've had projects that have been everything from auditing marketing efforts. We get asked to do that quite a bit, actually, to come in and evaluate how your marketing teams or vendor partners are participating and performing. And we have done work with the Department of Defense in terms of visualizing and sharing data with regards to soldiers returning from deployment and the impact that that might have on a community, a hospital, group of people, etc. So we've been out there quite a bit. We've seen quite a bit, and at the end of the day, I think you took the words right out of my head. We like to think of ourselves as the wizard behind the curtain, that we don't necessarily like to be seen, but we like our efforts to be felt.
Well, and it's so important when you start thinking about what data and analytics and all this information can actually tell you about your marketing effort. And I'm excited today for you to just kind of give us the high level overview of whether we are a itty bitty company or a great big. I know we've got several folks that had registered for this call that are leaders in sales and marketing within larger organizations. So you're going to have a little bit of a challenge today with talking to us about exactly where we're at, meeting us where we're at. So I think it's the talk that you're going to put together for us. I'm excited to dive into. I think probably our big first question is, what is data? And I'm actually going to kill my webcam because I've got some crazy stuff going on with internet. There you
And
go.
now I'm all alone.
You are all alone. If you'd like, you can kill yours too, but it just depends on what your bandwidth is doing on your end.
I think we'll be okay. So, well, to answer the question, when we talk about data, we are talking about any of that measurable activity that we can actually quantify about your business, about your customers, about your sales and marketing efforts. Anything that in essence could be put into a spreadsheet could be quantified as data. Now, of course, as we dive into that, we're going to see that data can vary in terms of its quality, its quantity, and its usefulness, but data is basically tracking the information about your activity. Too often we see clients that will run into an ad or run into a marketing strategy or run into some internal operation effort based off, as you said, that gut feel. I think this is a great idea. And while gut feels are a great place to start, they're a great place to brainstorm and launch new initiatives, they really do need to be measured for effectiveness and efficiency to make sure that they're providing the results that you want. And that's where the data comes in. It's the facts that back up the theory of your gut check. So when we're looking at data, we can create a whole bunch of ways to evaluate it. I'm sure most of you have heard of KPIs, those key performance indicators. These are the numbers that you watch to keep your finger on the pulse of your business. How are you doing? Are you moving in the right direction? Because as many of us know, sales don't happen instantly. A lot of times it takes a journey of efforts to close a sale. And these key performance indicators should be giving you some indication of what your pipeline looks like, what your forecasting looks like, what your customer base looks like, and to Brendan's point, who your ideal customers and niches are. We can put those on dashboards. We can put them as metrics that you measure your sales team by, your service team by, your account reps, your operations team, etc., and use all of that to help make sure that you're moving in the right direction. Now, before I dive too deep into the different types of data, the one big thing that I think is very important to share about data is that we have to keep it in context. Too frequently, I see data get misused. The story gets told inaccurately. We've all heard it said that numbers don't lie, but the way we present them can be misleading. And one of the anecdotes that I have for that is that once upon a time, they used to suggest that the Honda Accord was the most stolen car in America. And while that number and that fact may have been true, it leads the buyer, the consumer, to a false assumption. It leads them to thinking that I don't want to buy a Honda Accord because it's going to get stolen. The truth of the matter behind that statistic wasn't that the car had inferior security systems or were highly sought after by car thieves. The truth of the matter is there were more Honda Accords on the road than any other car. And so in order to maintain context, it's better to break things down either into percentages or ratios, something that can help even the playing field so that you're always comparing apples to apples. In this case, when we're looking at the Honda Accord, what we may want to do is say, how many Honda Accords are stolen per 10,000 units sold? By doing that, then you can compare it to other vehicles that maybe haven't sold the volume that the Honda Accord has, but have sold hundreds of thousands of units, and actually be able to compare those apples to apples. So as we talk about the data today, we're going to keep coming back to that idea of keeping your information in context and keeping it in the right focus and the right framing so that it's telling the story that it needs to tell. With regards to KPIs, we frequently will talk about just KPIs as all the key performance indicators. here at CarbonIsle, we actually try and break those KPIs or all your metrics into 4 categories. The first of which is that prime metric. So the prime metric is kind of what Brendan was already saying when you're talking about identifying an ideal customer. The prime metric is, why are you in business? I think there's maybe the slide for the next one on this, Chris. Thank you. The prime metric is why you're in business. Now, sometimes it's harder to quantify because maybe it's, well, not harder to quantify, but it's number of meals delivered to the homeless, or number of votes attained, or number of impacts made in a community, something that's changed that's not necessarily driven by the almighty dollar. But for most businesses, that prime metric is directly related to their revenue. It's and more specifically, their profit. One of the traps that I see a lot of folks fall into, and it's interesting because I can be on LinkedIn, I can be on Facebook, and I'll see ads from other marketing companies that will make a promise of a 5x return on ad spend or a 10x ROAS. And while that sounds fantastic to have, I spent $1,000 and I got a $5,000 return on my effort, the truth of the matter is that if you're only looking at revenue, you might be missing the boat, because a 5x return on revenue means that you'll need a minimum 20% profit margin to benefit from the effort. Because a 20% profit margin, $5,000 in revenue, is going to be $1,000 in profit, which is what you paid the marketing company in the first place. So at that point, you're just coming out completely even. And so what we always encourage our clients to do is start by defining what their prime metric is. Everything else should be an extension of that. If it's about increasing the bottom line, increasing that net profit, the retained earnings, what your shareholders are going to maintain, then let's set that as the prime metric. And from the prime metric, we can start developing our key metrics. The key metrics are anything that can directly and instantly impact the prime metric. So when we're tearing apart the data and we're looking at things, key metrics are units sold, hours billed, any of those things that can directly and instantaneously influence the prime metric. If they don't move the prime metric right away, they're not a key metric in our book. This can also be, though, your cost of goods sold, the operating expense related to selling your product or your service. This can be any of those things that have an influence on, in our case right now, net profit. What's interesting about key metrics in our mind is that the key metrics often become the prime metrics of departments. So for example, if you have a sales team that's selling your widget, for your company, you may have a sales team that sells, let's use cars as an example. We sell cars, we service cars, and we buy and trade cars. You got 3 different departments. The sales team is not going to be measured, for example, on the number of service calls they have, the number of cars that they repair. But sales, units sold, is one of your company's key metrics because it influences the prime metric. And therefore, that key metric of the company could become the prime metric of the sales team. And so when we're looking at key metrics, sometimes this starts to create that nice hierarchy tree of relationships. And so it helps you when you're, if you're a smaller business and you're attempting to try and figure out, how do I measure my guys? How do I measure my team? How do I know if we're being successful? What should I measure team A on, the service team on, the sales team on, the account representatives team on? A lot of times their prime metric is a key metric. So the more you work these numbers backwards, the more you're going to know, you're going to kind of fill in those blanks by themselves. Behind our key metrics then is our supporting metrics. Now, supporting metrics are often used as KPIs because, and there we go, thank you. The supporting metrics, are those metrics that influence, but maybe don't have that direct impact on the metric above them. So if key metrics change at all, there is a guaranteed change in prime metric. You sell a unit, you move the profit needle, guaranteed. Supporting metrics, however, there's a good chance. These are the phone calls, these are the lead forms, these are the appointments, the home shows, the trade shows, the
The
proposals.
activity that leads to your results.
Exactly. And so these are those activities that ought to influence your key and prime metrics, but there's no guarantee because not everybody buys the product that we propose. This is where we really start to see the introduction of conversion rates and those ratios in some of that context, because the trap that a lot of people will fall into here is they'll get hung up on this or the vanity metrics, and we can touch base on that real quick. Vanity metrics are the fun metrics. They're at the top of your funnel. They do have an influence on your business. They indicate something about your business, maybe brand awareness, top of mind awareness, corporate
Number of
impact.
impressions, likes, things like that.
Right, it's your Facebook likes, it's your Twitter followers, it's your website visitors, number of cars that drive by your billboard on the highway every day. They do create awareness, but those metrics very seldom have a super impactful or super impact on those prime and key metrics. And the reason this is important, one of the examples I like to give is we worked with somebody who was in a sales business, and they had a sales guy. They had set out, because they had, like every other company out there, they had worked their funnel backwards. One sale takes 3 proposals. Every proposal takes 5 appointments. Every appointment takes 20 emails. Every email takes 10,000 website visitors. Whatever their funnel may have been, they had worked out their equation. And those equations are fantastic, but they suffer from one tragic flaw that's easy to manage if you're aware of it. And that is that they all presume that that top of funnel is created equal. And so to demonstrate, this client had a sales company or had a salesperson who was top 3 of their sales staff every period. Every reporting period, they were in the top numbers, but they were only making half the phone calls that they were being asked to make. And there was a lot of frustration because the consensus was, wow, if this person would make all the phone calls he's supposed to make, just think of how many sales he would make.
His sales would double.
Right. Trouble is that the sales guy, the reason he was so successful is because he had been filtering his lists. He knew that in his industry, companies of a certain size would not buy the product because there wasn't a positive return on investment for them. The software that they were selling cost more than the savings that they would generate by using it. And so he was able to filter out half the list because they were businesses that couldn't buy. And so by doing that, he could still focus on the same half of his list that was productive that everybody else had. You know, we've all heard the 80% of our profits or 80% of our progress comes from 20% of our clients.
Yep,
he was just focusing. And by doing that, not only did he focus his efforts, but he was at a place where he could spend twice as much time per lead than he was before, which helped him further enhance how well he could convert those leads to sales. And so when you look at conversion rates, that's super important. There was an experience that we were in at one point as well, where a bank had increased their lending portfolio from $30 million to $55 million. They also noticed that they had more repossessions in the lot, and they were getting nervous because they had increased the number of repossessions, and they thought, this is bad, we're doing something wrong. Truth of the matter is that they had more repossessions in their lot because their loan portfolio was bigger. And realistically, when we broke down the numbers for them, we were able to show them that the repossession rate had actually gone down. So the portfolio had grown, and they had gotten better about writing solid loans that weren't repossessing. And so that's why we look at these metrics. That's why we look at this conversion. And so once you have all this information, knowing what these metrics are, we have to figure out where we're going to get it. And so there are a number of places, and I think we've got some slides for this next.
Hang on here for just a sec, if I can. I want to clarify something here for the folks in our audience. And this is kind of when I had my first big epiphany about making strategic and quality decisions about my business and watching my clients make better decisions. It seems like many business owners use historical data and make a lot of their decisions based on where they've been rather than where they're going. And what I'm hoping everybody is picking up from our conversation here is that the historical data will give you the metrics that Mike is talking about, that you then can monitor things. So what he's talking about that is so important is the emphasis on, it's not just the activity, it's not just the numbers, it's also your conversion rates. And when you talk about the levers and gauges and things that you can pull in your business and turn, it's all based on identifying the big things that you then improve little things within your performance to get better outcomes. And what he's sharing with you is how you identify what those little things are that are actually the big drivers in your business.
That's
So
right.
I just wanted to jump in real quick because that was my aha moment.
I appreciate you jumping in. I'm used to these presentations being more of a dialogue anyway, so to just sit here and speak seems a little foreign to me. But you're absolutely right, and a lot of times clients will get focused on the wrong metric. They take for example a company that maybe has to sell their product offline. They, let's say tractors, for example, that are hundreds of thousands of dollar equipment. You're not going to get somebody that's going to pay for that via a credit card over the internet. That's going to have to be handed off to a salesperson and closed offline. Well, focusing on website traffic alone, a vanity metric, website traffic can be increased very easily. It can be increased by running ads outside of the United States, but those folks aren't going to buy your tractor because they're overseas. Or we could look at lead conversion, the lead form that you use on your website, and say we want more lead form completions. All a company would need to do is run an ad saying, fill out this form for a chance to win an Xbox or a PlayStation 5 and send it to every fraternity in the nation, and you'll get more lead forms, but none of those students are going to buy your tractor. And that's where the conversion rate really comes in, because just because you increase website visitors or lead form completions or whatever metric you're tracking doesn't guarantee you're going to increase the bottom line unless you can maintain that conversion rate. And that conversion rate is one of the best indicators you have of making sure that your efforts are still in line with what you're trying to accomplish. Because if that starts to fluctuate, if it goes down, you're getting off base. If it increases, you're becoming more focused.
Exactly. So with that, as we're talking about making better decisions, where are we supposed to find the data in our business to get to the important metrics that you're talking about?
Well, one of the best places to start with that, so one place to start, and this is higher up in your funnel usually, is your website. So at bare minimum, every company should be running at least Google Analytics on their website to get the site traffic, sessions, page duration, how long are your users engaged with certain content, how many pages are they going through. You really should be checking a flow. Are there pages? One of the things, again, this goes to a conversion rate, is I see companies a lot of times say, what's my most popular pages? And you'll see where all the traffic is going, but they don't take the time to look into their analytics to see where the drop-off pages are. The pages where a visitor gets to this page and they're done. That's the last page they want to look at and they're off the site. Google Analytics tracks even that for you. And so if your most popular page is also the page that has the highest drop-off rate, something needs to change, because that means that most of your people get to that page and say, I'm done, and they bounce off your site. So what you should be looking at, in addition to just what's the most popular page, what are the pages that move the customer forward? And so your website has all that kind of data. If you can find a way to anonymize your user quickly, either through tracking software that can help with the IP address, or with, you see this on e-commerce sites a lot, you get the Price is Right spinning wheel, enter your email address and maybe you'll get 15% off. all they're doing is trying to unanonymize you. They can immediately associate your email address to the IP address you're using to visit the website. And now everything that you do on the site here forward can be attributed back to a particular user. And so your website has a wealth of opportunity to track what pages are they interested in. Are they spending most of their time in the winter coats section, or are they spending most of their time in the swim trunks because they're getting ready to go on vacation? And when you start looking at data, when we start talking later about the big data and really taking this to the next step, which would be a different conversation probably all on its own, this is the information that allows you to personalize your efforts, to really make sure that your messaging, your branding, your communications, your marketing journey all resonate with the user on a user by user level. So the website's one of the first places to get data. What do we have next? Our marketing reports, absolutely. So this is going to usually come from your marketing team. This is going to come from, or your marketing partners if you're outsourcing and using vendor partners. They're going to be providing data like click-through rates, and they'll have some conversion metrics there. Key here is to, just like with our flat numbers don't need to be kept in check via their conversion rate, even your conversion rates need to be making sure they're moving the bottom line. So we have a company in Texas that does residential house cleaning, and they came to us to audit their marketing efforts and say, hey, we're spending a lot of money on paid search every month, but we're not sure that we're getting anything for it. And their paid search company was doing a fantastic job. You know, when we looked at how much they were spending per impression and how much they were spending per click of the ad, the numbers looked really good. They were getting good bang for their buck. But what we weren't getting is how effective those clicks were. How many of those clicks were resulting in appointments that ultimately generated revenue. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. But it's one piece of the puzzle to know how well is our traffic converting, and marketing reports are a great way to do it. Another great place, I think next up is CMS. Yeah, CRM, CMS. The CRM, this is where you really should be tracking your sales team's activities. This is where we're going to see emails and phone calls and interactions and how often we're engaged with our clients. That engagement can tell you a lot. It can tell you a lot about how many phone calls are necessary to close a deal. It can tell you if you have agents that perform better in some sectors than others. We helped a client once. They had a sales guy that was just doing absolutely wonderful in Arizona, and they couldn't figure out why for sure. The truth be told, they didn't know why. They just knew he had decent numbers, but across the board, his numbers were on par with everybody else's. When we broke down the data, we saw that he had a huge spike in his sales when he was talking to customers from Arizona. And that huge spike combined with maybe some subpar performance across the board made him look average. When we talked to him about why are you doing so well in Arizona, it turned out he used to play college ball in Arizona. So he knew the layout, he knew the land or the territory, he could talk shop, he could ask if the diner was still open, etc. And by uncovering that, they just made him the Arizona sales guy. They took the other states off his plate, let him focus exclusively on Arizona, and he became one of their top performers because, again, just like our software sales guy before, they separated the wheat from the chaff. So your CRM can really tell you a lot about your sales team. It can tell you a lot about your phone calls. The trick here, and I know Brendan will echo this, is you've got to get your sales team to use it. Garbage in, garbage out. You have to make sure that they're recording their activities properly, their phone calls, their emails, et cetera. And sometimes that can be one of the hardest challenges, is to get them to send an email through the CRM as opposed to through Outlook. Depending on your CRM, however, we can integrate those two together so that they can continue to send through Outlook and still get tracked in the CRM.
Well, and now CRMs are amazing because they can actually integrate with your mobile devices so that everything that you do, even if it's a text or a message on your cell phone, can integrate into your CRM. So then, and one thing that I have found, my own performance is typically 30 to 40% higher when I'm using a CRM than when I'm not. So if you have the opportunity, you've got a sales team that is performance based in terms of how they're compensated, then they have skin in the game to use the CRM. And the biggest challenge that I found with this is just helping the sales team recognize that this is where we all win. And what I have found is the people that are very resistant to using a CRM don't have the activity going that they need to have, and they recognize that as soon as they start putting this information into the CRM, that now that lack of activity will be visible. And you can't hide when you have these in place. There's no more of this, well, I just don't have good quality prospects if they're only making 5 dials per week, and somebody that's outperforming them is making 125 dials per week. It's obvious at that point.
And once you start tying, particularly for sales teams, it seems like once you start tying their dashboards to their compensation, and they can pull up their dashboard at any given time and see what their activity markers are looking like and what that's doing to their commission base, you'll find that they get real adamant about getting things recorded into the system when the paycheck's on the line.
Yeah, salespeople are funny like that, aren't they?
They are. But again, going back to that, you know, it is important, because if you have a sales member, for example, that's not delivering on his prime metric, he's not making the sales, then we should back up and we should start trickling back down. What do his key metrics look like? What do his supporting metrics look like? What do his vanity metrics look like? And you'll find the weak link, like you said, Brendan. You'll come to a gentleman or a sales lady that is not making their quota, and you can say, you're only making 5 calls a week. You should be making 125 a week. And that's a great place to start to getting them back on track. Now, if they're delivering really well on the prime metric, but maybe not getting some of those markers on number of phone calls, for example, you might want to dive a little bit deeper into why they're able to be more effective than the rest of your staff with less phone calls, and see if they've figured out a filter or an approach that you weren't aware of that's working really well for them. It could be like the guy in Arizona. He just stopped calling all the other states.
Absolutely.
So,
And that is a very good point that I do want to make right now, because all too often what happens is business leaders just continue to hammer on their best guy and say, well, I want you to be working now twice as hard, when actually their motivation was working smarter and being a lot more effective. So it's a better approach to make them your mentor and help them show the process across the rest of the team. And that'll also help you break down a lot of your silos.
yeah,
within.
you don't want to punish them for getting better at their job.
Exactly. And that is probably one of the biggest takeaways that I'd like anyone listening to this, because all too often salespeople hate it with using a CRM because they kind of feel like they're being bludgeoned with data, and that everybody's just into call reports and micromanaging. And you've got to be careful with that when you are pulling this information out of it, and make sure that you are identifying the patterns and the behavior that you want to improve or drive more of. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I remember in terms of getting salespeople on board with using CRMs.
And then the last slide we have here, of course, is your bookkeeping. Whatever it is you're using to track your sales, bookkeeping is a wealth of information for how your company is doing, what your profit leaders are, what your best services, best products are, cost of good expenses. Again, just like with your CRM, the trick here is to make sure that it's all getting into the system. Usually the larger clients we work with don't have this problem, but as the company gets smaller, we start to see more and more irregularities within the bookkeeping software. We were asked to evaluate a construction company here in town that was doing terrific revenue, 7-figure revenues, but wasn't generating profit. The owner was confuzzled because there wasn't anything left over at the end of the year. And so we asked him a little bit about how he was bidding projects, and he was taking estimated labor and estimated costs, and he was multiplying it by 1.5. So he'd have a 33% margin, which was industry appropriate. And sitting here thinking, all right, well, there's no way you've got 33% in overhead. Let's have a look. And we quickly saw top line of his P&L statement that his cost of goods sold and his labor was representing closer to 90% of his overall revenue. So he was already way off this 1.5 ratio that he was aiming for. And so we didn't have to dig but for 4 minutes to say something's going wrong between what you're estimating a job at and what you're actually spending on the job. Let's pull a contract. Let's pull a contract and let's review. Let's see if it's your plumbing or if it's your materials or if it's, you know, where are we slipping on our estimate? They didn't have any of the information in their system. They weren't logging invoices and receipts for their subcontractors or their materials bought to individual jobs. So they had no way of knowing what sector or what subcontractor or what jobs they weren't estimating properly. And just by making sure you get that data into the system, you can start to find the answers you're looking for. But just like with the CRM, you have to get the data into the system. So with that all in mind, the next big thing is not only getting it into the system, but making sure it's all tied together. So if we go back to that company that was doing the house cleaning, the residential house cleaning, the dashboards that they were looking at for their marketing reports looked really great, but they didn't feel like they were actually getting any more sales. The data wasn't tied together. We had to go to 4 different places to try and construct a picture for them. We took the marketing report that said, here's what your impressions are, here's what your clicks are. And then we had to go to a website report to see how many form completions, because they had a form on their website of, you know, fill this out to schedule an appointment. Now, it wasn't you scheduled the appointment via the form, it was a lead form. It was a contact form, and a dispatcher would then call the customer to schedule the appointment. So we would go in. Well, these 2 platforms weren't tied together at all. So we had no idea, with the number of lead forms that had been completed, how many of them had come to the website as a result of the marketing efforts. So I could already tell just by the numbers that we were going to be terrifically off base. So we gave the marketing company total credit. We presumed that every single lead form that the website had completed was a direct result of the marketing efforts and not organic traffic or referral traffic or anything else. Then we had to go to the dispatch team and see, of the lead forms, how many of those leads actually converted into appointments. And then we had to take that and tie it with data from the bookkeeping software, which was easier to do because at this point we were able to compare addresses of how much revenue was generated per house cleaning for those addresses. And long story short, by the time we took the $5,000 a month ad spend and we broke it down all the way through the chain, all the way through the funnel, we found out that they were spending about $87 per house cleaning. And by the time they paid on a $175 house cleaning, by the time they paid their staff, their insurance, etc., they were losing about $12 per lead that the marketing team was generating. And that's assuming that all the leads came from the marketing company. If any of them came from anywhere else, the picture only got worse. And so it really starts to show why you need to start breaking down these silos, why you need to start tying this data all together. Because remember, that marketing company looked great in terms of their impressions and their click-through rate. But if you can't look at it across the entire picture, all the way back to that prime metric, you don't know its real impact. And so there are a lot of platforms out there that have great integrations. We help companies all the time integrate data and share information back and forth in real time, so that not only can you see how effective maybe your paid search is, but we can actually help you determine which paid search campaigns are actually performing the best. It's not just your paid search, but maybe it's certain demographics, certain times a day, on and on. So once you have that, then you can start tracking your trends. You can start looking at your historical trends, your cyclical trends. One of the mistakes that I see a lot of companies make, particularly our smaller clients, small business clients, is they'll sit there and go, wow, sales are down. They're down 12% this month from last month. And it's hard in the beginning, especially when you only got a year of data. Once you get a couple years in, it gets a little bit easier, but you may be facing cyclical trends. December may be a slow month for you. And I've seen companies still look at the conversion rates wrong and say, wow, we declined 11% from November to December this year, and last year we only declined by 5%. But how did November look? Because again, we could be taking things out of context. We could be going back to the Honda Accord. Let's look at December sales of 2020 versus December sales of 2019, 2018, etc. That's how you really start to see the trend for the month. You look within the year to see your cyclical trends, to see, is it constantly July is our best month, December's our low month, whatever. But you look at multi-years to determine your real trends. And this will help you to make better decisions by knowing the profitability that each customer has. We just did, for the client that Brendan was talking about, we did a small analysis. We always ask, what's your most profitable client? And more often than not, the clients will come back and say, the customer with the highest revenue. But typically what we find is that the customer with the highest revenue is not the customer with the highest profit.
Right.
The customer at the highest profit's usually your second or third or maybe fourth highest revenue. And by taking things and looking at the profit, especially if you can look at the amount of work that goes into acquiring that business, that's when you really start to find that low-hanging fruit. Sure, maybe selling batteries isn't as profitable as selling your primary widget, or maybe you don't sell as many batteries, it's a lower price tag than your primary widget. But you sell so many of them and they're so easy to sell that you're leaving, food on the table, so to speak. We see this a lot with companies that whether it's selling soap or selling parts or selling accessories. I've got examples I usually give about how McDonald's is successful. It's not off selling the burger. The burger pays for all the costs of the staff, the building, the grease, the electricity, utilities, etc. It's the fries and the soda that's just pure profit at that point because the burger paid all the cost. And companies need to be able to see where these profits are and what their costs are, because that's how you find those little tweaks that can make huge impacts on your bottom line.
So we have a question here from one of the participants. It says, if you have not been doing this type of analysis, but you have some data, do you have a process to quickly develop appropriate reports?
Oh, good question.
So that happens a lot. As companies grow, typically solopreneurs, for example, they start off and they're wearing 17 hats and they're not recording a lot of data. What we do is we start with the reporting that we have, and we will put asterisks on reports if we need to that says that the data is not yet significant. We get somebody that comes in and says, well, I've sold 4 units. I can't tell you a trend off 4 units sold. I can give you some guesses of how it's looking right now, but it can be wildly erratic in the beginning. But you can still develop reports, and you start by putting together a report, and then you figure out which numbers you're missing. What are you not capturing? What information are you not gathering? And let's start gathering that. I mean, no better time than today to start gathering the information that you need. And then we can start taking asterisks off as we get more data, and as time goes by, we can start testing our hypothesis and go, hey, look, you were right, that is related to this, and we can prove it now. And you just start building, you start adding on to it with every chance you get. I always recommend, if you don't have Google Analytics, get it. If you don't have access to your Google Analytics, get it. Make sure you know what your website's doing. Make sure you're recording everything in your bookkeeping. If you don't have your CRM, let's get one added, but for now we can work with websites and bookkeeping alone. And
Get a CRM. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um,
If you're going to be in business, you have to have a CRM. So if you have an email address, then you're big enough to get a CRM.
you are. And I completely agree with that, with what Brendan's saying. I just run into a lot of clients that don't have CRMs yet, and then they get distraught because, wow, I don't even have one of the entire platforms. Get it, let's start collecting data in it, but we can still do some work in figuring out some initial insights off the platforms that you do have.
And a CRM can be free in
Yeah.
several instances. There are, if you don't have hundreds of contacts that you're trying to manage, Zoho is a free option. Mike, you're doing work in Zoho and are finding it an adequate solution.
HubSpot has a free option, Zoho and Sightly. Most of your big ones, I think even Pipedrive has a free version. It just depends on how many records you're going to maintain or how many users you're going to have.
And my favorite is Nimble, and I think it's $12 a month.
Yeah,
And
Nimble's fantastic.
And it's really good because it integrates across your social platforms as well. So it grabs data from a lot of different places for you.
Actually, one of the things that I love most about Nimble, so we're an Office 365 shop here, and I know a lot of businesses are using G Suite with Google. But a lot of companies, the bigger companies, are using Office 365, and some of those free CRMs or those low-price CRMs don't integrate, don't play well with Office 365. Nimble does, and so for that reason alone, Nimble always makes the top 2 on my list.
So it's a very good one. Awesome. Okay, we'll keep moving. So this is the other big thing that data, I think, can do for you is identify where you've got the massive train wrecks that are in your future.
Yeah.
I've seen this happen so many times where people go, oh, and this is one of my favorite examples of why I always bring in someone like you, even if it's somebody that does have a lot of data. It's funny, I was working with a tech company that they tracked everything. And this goes back to vanity metrics. They tracked everything that their clients did, and they had all kinds of great data about number of website visits and what pages were they clicking on. And it was funny because I asked him, I said, so what sector is the most profitable for you? And it's funny because he said, oh, my best clients, and he works in the construction industry. He said, my best clients are all the general contractors. And I said, okay, as opposed to the specialty contractor or the niche contractors? He said, yes, my most profitable clients are the general contractors, and my least profitable are the heavy contractors. And it was so funny because we brought in and did a data analysis, and it turned out that as they dove into the profitability per account, and
Yeah,
what you pointed out also, it was the client acquisition cost. So they did also track the number of conversations, the number of emails, how they had to discount or reduce price or increase scope of work in order to secure the work. By the time they factored that information into the profitability analysis, it turned out heavies were so insanely profitable. They made twice the profit on the heavy contractors that they did on the general contractors, and the general contractors were a pain in their backside.
We help. It's so fun when you have a company that's trying to figure out how to improve their bottom line, and you can put together a dashboard that suddenly highlights a number in red of, hey, here's a bottleneck, here's where something's not going right, and you're absolutely right. We helped a client that was selling a $15 widget, and it wasn't selling terribly well, so they cut the price in half, down to $750, and units started moving, but their profit didn't start moving, and they couldn't figure out why. And it was because customer acquisition, shipping of the product were so high. I mean, they had, I think it was like a $2 or $3 product cost and a $2 acquisition cost and a $2 shipping cost. And by the time you did all that, you were at $7. And so we made one simple recommendation to them, change the price back to $15, but sell 2 for $15. And so now their product cost is $4. Their acquisition was still 2, their shipping was still 2, and there was meat left on the bone. And you know, and sometimes it can be something as simple as that. And you sit there and think, well, selling 2 for 15 is the same as selling 1 for $7.50, but it's not, because of those overhead or those intrinsic costs.
Absolutely. Building dashboards. Ooh, now how do we put all this stuff
slide in there? So whatever you use, there's a lot of BI tools out there that you can use. We build a lot of dashboards. Typically, where I recommend, if you're really trying to track things, a lot of times I build dashboards closer to the CRM. It's oftentimes easier to bring your website data and your sales data into the CRM than it is to bring the data into, say, your bookkeeping software or into your website analytics. So I usually like to build dashboards there. And then, of course, we'll filter those dashboards. The sales team doesn't necessarily need to see every dashboard that's available. But building those dashboards, keeping that prime metric in line, making sure that you're keeping a good eye on the key metrics that really matter. And then I recommend having those conversion rates on your dashboard so that you can see if conversion rates start to dip, because whenever your ratios start to change, that is an indicator that something in the future is about to change for you. So
can you say that again?
Huh?
I want everybody to get that right now.
Whenever you see the conversion rate, the number of percentage of people that's going from stage A to stage B in the sales process, doesn't matter, you know, moving from one stage of your sales process to the next. Whenever that conversion rate starts to change, it is an indicator that the business you're going to be performing in the future is about to change.
And that is so critically important, especially right now, that you understand what are the leading indicators in your business rather than the lagging indicators. And that's what you want in your dashboard.
Well, take, for example, a company that's selling sanitizer. At the beginning of this year, maybe sanitizer wasn't their primary product, and all of a sudden they start getting some orders coming in for sanitizer. If you're watching your conversion metrics, you're watching your channels, and you see that a particular page, the page about your sanitizer, is suddenly getting a lot more traffic, and that traffic is converting to the next step in ways that it's never done before, you see that that's coming long before the orders get placed, long before they get fulfilled, long before they get paid for. And you can start jumping on that train as it's leaving the station, not trying to catch up to it after it's gone.
Especially now when we're all experiencing channels with supply chain, especially based on, and we are going to be, you know, we've been in a society that was held so much to the just in time and only stocking the minimal amount of inventory. And now everybody's caught. And when you've got supply chain issues, whether it's because shipping isn't working or whatever, we've got an interruption. These are all things that allow you to actually get ahead of that so that you can put solutions in place. So that's very important. Okay, I've got a really quick question for you here, and I know this isn't in your outline, so I'm throwing you a little bit of a curveball. So how transparent do you recommend that we be with our employees? So in other words, when you're talking about building dashboards, do we let them see total company revenue and profitability and back into how much we make as business owners? What's the best strategy?
I think that actually can vary from culture to culture. I have seen organizations that share the entire P&L statement every month. What I find when you do that is that you do need to make sure that you have an audience that is educated to understand how those numbers work. I've seen it when companies share that profit and loss statement every single month, and then they have to explain accrual-based accounting, that yes, it looks like we've already used up 95% of our insurance budget and we're only in January, but we prepay insurance for the year. So it's going to stay at 95% now till the end of the year. And being able to explain that, being able to show them how those numbers move is important. Sometimes though, you run into the reverse of the situation where showing them that kind of information can lead them to think that either their impact is not meaningful or they're not being properly recognized for their impact. And if you're going to be that transparent, you almost need to show the whole picture so that they can get a glimpse of what your overhead costs are like. And because it's very easy for somebody to go out and say, I sold $1,000 worth of stuff, I made the company $1,000 today. No, you made us $117 in profit today.
Right.
And sharing that can be very, very helpful, but it really depends on the culture you have. It depends on, is the team invested in the business's success, or and what's their education level? How well will they understand it? Are their eyes going to gloss over and they're going to ignore it? And that really does have to be evaluated kind of on a case by case.
Yeah, I've had experience with that where an employee saw a presentation, or almost like a bid, right? It saw what we charge per hour and different costs and everything, and they don't, exactly what you said, they didn't put in there what your overhead cost is. They didn't understand all that. They just saw, hey, I make a small percentage of that
Right.
per hour cost, and they were very upset.
Well, but then on the flip side, I've seen it where a company, a big company, 3,000 employees, good sized company, has asks their employees to log every hour that they spend on a client. And then the customers end up thinking, man, if I call them to wish them a happy Thanksgiving, I have to log this. Are we billing them for me wishing them a happy Thanksgiving? What a greedy company I must work for.
Right.
And that's not the case at all. You know, in this case, the employee doesn't realize the difference between billable and unbillable activity.
Right.
And that we want to track it so that we know, are we spending an appropriate amount of time with each of our clients, but that doesn't mean that we're billing them for it. And so making sure that they have that understanding is important.
Fantastic. Well, you have covered some amazing information for us today, Mike, and I am
very fast.
Oh my goodness. You gave I think everybody on the call, no matter where they're coming at in their business, you gave them some phenomenal information to begin thinking about their data differently. And that is exactly what I was hoping for. So I want to give you a huge shout out. We do have a slide on here that has, I believe it has your contact information on here. I know Chris is normally the one who puts all that information together, and it's funny because it's that whole, he makes you look good. He really does make you look good. So I know I can count on that. Now, I do want to give a shout out now to our sponsors also. We've got the Women's Business Center that's been a regular sponsor of our program, and we are so delighted to collaborate with them and provide value to their audience, and also share with you what they can offer to you. They've got some phenomenal programs that dive into, there's a lot more of their programs. So today we picked on Mike, asking him to talk more from the marketing and the sales side of it to make sure that your efforts are being spent where they should be. The Women's Business Center has a ton of programming on setting up your financials or HR issues or whatever may happen to be, and it's all free. So go check it out. It's the Kansas City WBC.eventbrite.com. Check them out, see what programs they've got coming up. We also want to let you know that right now enrollment is open for productive prospecting. And we've got the information that's here on, there's a landing page here that has all the information about our program that's available. And it's where we help you focus your efforts around creating that top of funnel activity that's coming in via referral. So you end up getting very high quality opportunities. And our focus and emphasis is, of course, on referrals, which is where your conversions are high and your acquisition cost is low. So I would welcome. You want to take a peek at that. Also, you're going to be getting all of the links for today's recordings. And that information you're going to want to, of course, go connect with Mike from CarbonIsle and follow him. He's got some really good stuff that he shares. He is a phenomenal speaker. If you really want to put this to work in your business, I can't recommend him highly enough. He's been game changing for me with this client that we're working on right now. And we actually met through a common client in the past that it's funny because he was talking about the DoD client. And that was when I first heard of Mike, was the work that he did on that project. And let me tell you, you talk about herding cats and pulling a whole bunch of information together and making sense of it all. He truly is a master at it. So I can't recommend him highly enough. So I suggest you go check him out for sure. Chris, is there anything you want to add?
So you all, if you paid any attention to any of these webinars, you've heard me say over and over and over again is that you're going to make mistakes in marketing, and the key is to measure so that you don't make them twice. And I think that everything we just covered here, I've sat here with my jaw hitting the desk because it was just wonderful stuff. If what I would like to suggest is that y'all take some time. You got Mike's information right here. Shoot him an email, set up a one-on-one with him, talk to him about, if you haven't gotten started on this, you're late. Get started, and maybe you can contract him to kind of help you decide which CRM and set up your Google Analytics and things like that. Because this is all, folks, this is hyper important if you run a business. I can't recommend this enough. So I just wanted to put that in there.
And this is, I will share with you, this is something that a lot of people think that I'm not big enough yet, or even if you're big, then they start thinking about, holy cow, it's going to take me so long to go and clean up the mess that I've already got in terms of data. And I know a lot of businesses that have been around for a long time, they may have collected data and not know how to organize what they've got. So they create, it's kind of like when your house is a mess and you don't want the housekeeper to come in until you have the chance to clean, but you don't have time to clean. Don't do that.
No.
I mean, start today, start now. And this is something that can be game changing for you and your business. And I can't emphasize enough, Chris and I are on the same page here.
Oh, yeah.
This is do not pass go, do not collect $200, do it now.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you. And I hope everybody has an absolutely wonderful rest of your Friday. And remember to tune in and visit with us next week. We're going to be talking about the first session of every month is always think of it as your mini sales meeting, where you have a chance to come together, think about what your focus should be for the month of December. Where is your time best spent? What relationships do you focus on? And what activity is going to drive the best results? Especially since half of your customers may be kind of checking out and the other half may be in limbo right now, just based on all the uncertainty that's going on. So you're going to want to make sure that you join us for that next session. So I want to leave you with one thought. You can get anything you want in the world as long as you help enough other people get what they want. I want to wish you a good day and good selling to all.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.